Good morning. Welcome. It's always a special treat to have an opportunity to sit down and talk policy and politics with the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. In case you need reminding, that is Charlie Baker. Welcome, Governor Baker.
How are you, sir?
Good to have you here. I'm fine. Thank you very much for coming. So as we taped this interview earlier in the week, you had just announced that you will sign the House version of a bill guaranteeing transgender people equal access to public facilities. Now, 5 years ago, you strongly opposed a previous effort to do this. What's the difference between that bill and this one?
Well, there are a number of differences, John. First of all, as you may recall, that legislation was broken up into parts, and the part that passed in 2011 I did support. And the legislation that's currently before the House, which talks about sort of clarifying roles for the Mass Commission Against Discrimination and for the Attorney General to basically establish what I would call the rules of the road with respect to how this would work to ensure that people don't take advantage of this in inappropriate ways, I think is an important element of what should be in the final legislation.
How does this do that in a way that wasn't done 5 years ago?
Well, the previous legislation was completely silent on this issue. There was nothing in there for anybody to provide any guidance around this stuff. And I think for the public safety concerns some people have raised, I think that's an important element.
So you were persuaded by all the worries about bathrooms being invaded by predators?
Well, keep in mind that in Massachusetts, at least at the K through 12 level, and for many other colleges and universities and a lot of employers, we already have what, for all intents and purposes, looks like what this legislation would accommodate. But I do think that hotels, restaurants, retail, what I would describe as sort of the broad collection of public accommodation, including the bathroom piece, is something that we should do, and we should be publicly accommodating. We shouldn't discriminate against people.
According to local economists writing in the journal Mass Benchmarks recently, despite positive economic statistics right now, they write, quote, "The state economic outlook rests on precarious footing." They cite uncertain outlook for the global economy, recent slowing of U.S. economic growth, and what I call the big three of problems here in Massachusetts: inadequately funded education, cost of housing, and crumbling infrastructure. Is that analysis right?
Look, it depends on what the details actually say, but conceptually, I would agree with a lot of that. I mean, a big part of the reason why we've worked so hard to take our structural deficit in our budget from over $1 billion down to $250 million is because we fully expect at some point the economy is going to slow down. We are absolutely a global player in a global market as a Commonwealth, and if the global economy slows down, that has consequences for us from a revenue and a tax and a job point of view. And I also think, look, if you look at our 5-year capital plan, which is infrastructure, more than half of it is being invested in what we're calling deferred maintenance. Another 20% or so is being invested in modernizing existing operations, and only about 25% of it is focused on what I would call new stuff. And that's because we would agree that the Commonwealth has not done a good job over the course of the past decade or so of investing in its existing assets, and that's where we're going to put our money.
So you're going to need more revenues?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I think we should work within the framework that we've got. Think about what's going on at the MBTA. That Fiscal and Management Control Board, which was created as a result of the winter we had 2 winters ago, has been in business for less than a year, and they've already found hundreds of millions of dollars in savings. And everybody said, oh, the problem with the T is T has a revenue problem. I don't think most of the people who would look at this situation now would say that. A lot of people would say what I believe to be true, which is that the T needed a really solid dose of aggressive, forward-looking management that focused on what I would call the blocking and tackling of the operation.
But you're pursuing new revenue all over the place, right? Fare hikes, cracking down on fare evaders. You've just recently pulled back from the Green Line extension because of a lack of available revenue.
Oh, we pulled back on the Green Line extension because the original proposal for that, which started at around $950 million, ballooned to about $3 billion as a projection shortly after we took office. And we basically said, we're not going to support a $3 billion project, period, even if the feds paid for $1 billion of it. And I really admire the work that was done by the group we brought in to scale that project back to about $2.3 billion. And kudos to the cities of Cambridge and Somerville for coming up with a big piece of the $300 million so that we now have what we thought we had at the beginning of this was about a $2 billion initiative.
Last month in an interview, you were asked about the introduction of a graduated income tax that's headed for the ballot in 2018.
There's a few steps to get there, right?
It does. Yeah. Yes, it does. It would be a 4% surcharge on filers earning over $1 million, so-called millionaire's tax. And you said in response to a question about your view on this, you said, "I don't know. Let's see where we are when it gets there," end quote. Now, there's considerable speculation that you wouldn't necessarily mind a scenario where that passes. The state government receives all sorts of new revenue, and you don't have the votes to sustain a veto, so you suffer no political damage, but you get the benefit of the revenue. Is that true?
Well, I haven't been thinking about it that hard, although that's certainly one way to spin it. The question I got asked was a process question. I said earlier in that interview that I don't think we should be raising taxes on anybody. I mean, I made a no new taxes pledge when I ran, and I said I wasn't going to raise taxes, and I meant it. But the question I got asked was a process question, and to that I said, I don't know. I mean, is it going to get through all the various hoops it needs to get through to get on the ballot by 2018? Yes or no?
But you would oppose this then?
Oh, I don't think we should be raising taxes on anybody in Massachusetts.
No way, no how, no millionaire's tax, no nothing.
I don't think we should raise taxes, John.
Okay, that's a yes, right?
That's a yes.
Okay, excellent. We'll take a quick break. And we'll continue our conversation with Governor Charlie Baker in just a moment, so please stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking with Governor Charlie Baker this morning. And Governor, in the wake of the murder of Auburn police officer Ron Tarantino recently, you called for not for the first time, for the death penalty for cop killers. Are you going to file a bill toward that end?
I think we should at the start of the next session, absolutely, and have that debate. I also am anxious to see what some of the research that comes out of the investigations that are being done here, both on the how he got out, why he was still walking the streets question, which is an important one, but also what actually happened when Officer Tarantino approached George Zambrano's vehicle.
In general, do you believe we have a problem with lenient judges?
Well, part of the question I have here is what's the, what was the process here? And should we be making changes either to our existing laws with respect to assault and battery on a police officer, okay, which is a misdemeanor in Massachusetts? Maybe that should be a felony. And the other question about this is there are 3 separate bail hearings and 3 separate conversations that were had here. And is there a dangerousness element to this that should have been factored into it? But again, I want to see the results of that investigation as well as the investigation of the other pieces before I draw conclusions on what we should do.
Well, but my question was more generally, over time, do you believe judges in this state are too lenient with criminals?
I think I think all of this stuff is case specific. I'm not willing to comment on that generally one way or another. What I will say is there are some troubling elements to this story, and I want to know what the process was and the decision points were, and if, for example, if part of the reason why there wasn't a dangerousness hearing with respect to this particular gentleman was because assault and battery on a police officer is a misdemeanor and not a felony, maybe it should be a felony.
You've been in the habit of waving off questions about the presidential race on the grounds that you're focused on building the party locally.
Correct.
But the state Republican Party has struggled to recruit candidates for the legislature, falling well short of the yield just 2 years ago. What share of the blame for that falls on you?
Well, obviously, I'm the head of the party, so you can give me as much or as little blame as you like. But
well, do you blame yourself?
Well, let's see what happens in November.
Well, wait a minute. Nothing's going to happen without good candidates running.
Correct. And our focus has been on quality candidates. That was our focus heading into this cycle.
And it's been slim pickings, right?
I feel very good about the people we've got running.
Well, why has it been such slim pickings?
Well, I don't think it has been slim pickings.
In terms of...
historically, having a body running for office, John, is nowhere near as important as having somebody who can win and who will do the work. And I feel really good about the people we have running.
Letting an incumbent run unopposed does nothing to deter the worst excesses of incumbency, does it?
Well, except that putting a whole bunch of people to run just to have people run and investing time, focus, money, and resources in those races distracts from your ability to support the people you believe can actually succeed. So our focus is really on people we believe can win.
Well, what's wrong with the Republican Party brand?
I don't think there's, I could turn it around and ask you the same question about what's wrong with the Democratic Party brand, too. I think both parties suffer from a number of problems, and the biggest one is a lot of people believe that the parties are too focused on themselves and not enough on progress. I think one of our successes as an administration has been by focusing on the stuff people care about, which is jobs, schools, taxes, the economy, fixing the T, dealing with DCF, that sort of thing. I think we've gotten pretty, and not getting into a lot of the nonsense that passes for political discourse. I think people have been pretty appreciative of that, and I wish both parties would spend more time on that sort of thing.
Are you always going to be a Republican? Could you ever see yourself just dropping party affiliation?
No, I've been a Republican since I was 20. And I fully expect that I will continue to be one. And frankly,
It's like an old pair of jeans you just don't want to get rid of, is that it?
well, no, I believe in fiscally prudent government. I believe in the government that governs best is the one that's most local. Local government, state government. Part of the reason why I'm most interested in local government and state government is because I think there are real issues in Washington, and I can focus on the stuff I can do something about here, which I view as being very Republican.
All right. One last thing here. We taped earlier in the week, as we mentioned earlier, but it is Sunday, and later today, Barbara Anderson, the longtime anti-tax activist who passed away earlier this spring, is being honored by friends and admirers. In her final newspaper column published after her death, she wrote, quote, "If anyone wants to honor my memory, please remind Governor Charlie Baker that when he was running for office, he promised my friend Gerald Amirault and his family that getting Gerald off parole and his ankle bracelet would be a first order of business. So far, he has broken his promise, and keeping it is my dying wish," end quote. Will you honor that promise?
Gerald Amirault, as we all know, was part of the Fellsacre case. And as a registered sex offender in Massachusetts, any change in his status has to be voted on by the parole board and ultimately, I believe, depending upon what it is, approved by the Governor's Council. Governors have a very limited role with respect to both of those organizations. We certainly have made clear to him that if he would like to get guidance from our administration about how the process works and that type of thing, we'd be perfectly happy to make that available to him. But in the end, the reason we have an independent parole board and an independent Governor's Council is so that they can make independent decisions on the facts on cases like this, including this one. I'm a big fan of Barbara Anderson's, and I think as an anti-tax activist, there's never been a better one. But her understanding of how this actually works procedurally is probably not correct.
But you have no objections to him getting...
I have no objections to anybody seeking a hearing with the parole board, and I would expect the parole board to give them the fairest and most fact-based review that they possibly can.
Governor, thanks.
It's good to see you.
Thank you for coming in.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Governor Charlie Baker. That's it for us right now. I'm going to throw it back over to my colleagues for more WBZ News.